Okay, I'll call to order this meeting of the Upper Providence Board of Supervisors for the purpose of a library workshop, February 8th, 6 p.m., a little after. And we'll just, normally we say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of our meetings, but that's problematic in this format. So we'll just take a moment of silence to think about all those that have suffered from the coronavirus, and hopefully we'll be turning the corner on that soon. All right, thank you. And the purpose of our workshop, as I said, is a library workshop, and I'll let our presenters from Gensler Architects take over.
Thank you so much.
And I just made you co-host, Brian. Did you get it?
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Is my screen coming in?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and connect with you about this project. We're very excited about this. I hope it shows. We played with this concept. We're designers and architects, and this is the playful, fun part about this. Everything we're going to show you on the concept we did on this is really missing the key component, your involvement in this, your partnership, your collaboration, hearing your vision. But we're going to talk through several things today, and we took the liberty of naming this project just to play around with it some more. We're calling it the Black Rock Learning Center. Oh, and we're going to kind of talk through our firm a little bit, just to introduce ourselves a little. The people that are on this call, myself and Justin, and then we're going to show you a couple of projects to talk about design drivers on other libraries and what drove those designs, whether it be community engagement or staff development. And then we're going to talk through your concept project that we did for you. Gensler is a large firm. We have the ability to leverage that large firm resource, programs, different support, and also be embedded in our communities. Art Gensler has this great quote that you can't be global without being local. And I always like to adhere to that. I do municipal and county projects all over the United States, and I love working in these communities. I love hearing the mission statements and becoming a vested partner in that, hearing that and becoming a side-by-side partner with all of our clients on this. Gensler is a firm that has architecture, interiors, FF&E, furniture, fixtures, equipment, DXD experience, which is digital experience, consulting, and all of these scopes. We call it a one firm. It's different than hiring an architecture firm that has to bring in like a signage consultant. We are able to kind of take that collective design and collaboratively work together. You tell us your vision once, and we kind of run with that. And I always like to point out on this slide that the statistic that 90% repeat clients, and sometimes it's 91, 92% depending on which month you're looking at it. Why is that important to you? We're all about the client relationship. We're employee owned. We don't have to go back to a board of directors or stakeholders. If you tell us you need something to help you with the vision of the project or renderings or some type of a support, you just go back to the same people that are on this call. These will be the same people on this project from day one to end. We don't have people that go out and sell projects and have another team that comes in and does the work. We're what's called a seller doer. So we go out and find the work, and we bring the work in, and we do the work, and we maintain that relationship all the way throughout the project. Like I mentioned, we're an employee-owned design firm. We do all of the global perspective and the local community on all of our projects. You don't have to choose between that on this. And we're passionate about libraries. I'm not trying to show you, carpet bombing that, we've done a lot of libraries. We have a lot of experience with libraries, but each one is individual. And I think what you're going to see on the concepts that we show you today, they're all different because we check our egos at the door. We are excellent partners. We like to have fun. There's no finger pointing. There's no drama. we're not in this to win design awards. I put this up there to kind of illustrate one of the best tools to help project costs stay manageable and not be a surprise for everybody. I came from a firm where design was almost secondary. They were more concerned with project documentation and making sure that they had certain details right. Design decisions were made late in the process. We know how to help you maximize your budget by being great designers. And it sounds counterintuitive, but if designers understand this about them, and that's made very clear early on, when design decisions are made early in the process, you're incurring the less risk when you make decisions. The further you kick decisions down the road, the more risk you incur on these projects. So we are very good at communicating our designs. Our clients don't have surprises. Our contractors and our cost estimators don't have surprises, and we're able to maximize budgets. I'm Brian Nicodemus, and like I said, we'd like to have fun. And so I thought we'd throw out a fun fact as we're getting to know you virtually. I'm a Beatles nut, if you can tell on the wall behind me. And I've sort of brainwashed my kids that the Beatles are the center of the universe for me and all music. And Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Justin Bashaw. I'm a design director for the library and municipal practice area, as well as a few others. But I really specialize in experiences, designing experiences for people that are memorable, even through the construction document process. Honestly, my fun fact is I rehab historic homes in my spare time and bring life back to the old bones. There, I have a lot of respect for the heritage of architecture and I invest in that in my spare time.
JB and I have collaborated on the projects that we're going to show you today. They're all designs and that we worked on through different modes. And one thing that we want to kind of compliment you on is calling this a learning center, kind of breaking from that stigmatism of library and what everybody kind of assumes what a library's program and mission is. It's almost a finite mission. Calling it a learning center makes people inquisitive. We think that what is this facility all about? Why can't it house typical library program and then some for the community as a third place, as a main hub, especially for your campus? We're pretty excited about that. We're going to talk a little bit about ourselves a little more, but again, we're hoping that we illustrate the design drivers for each of these two projects, the Manske Public Library, which is in Farmers Branch, Texas, and the Frisco Library, both different drivers on these projects. And Justin, if you kind of talk
Sure.
through this illustration we're showing here.
Yeah, so the Manske Library it's been around for 50 years. The community loves it, but there is a group in the community that feels like it needs to be sort of pushed forward here into the next 50 years. And so this is a strategy we take on some work, and it's one we've taken on yours, which we'll walk you through. But it's this idea that we can develop a DNA for the building, and that DNA is sort of what gives shape to the form and experiences we create there. And so we wanted to give back to this community all the things they loved about the library and not Manske Public Library and not hurt that in any way. At the same time, we wanted to infuse in some things that'll help update it and sort of advance the paradigm of what a library could be, with both programmatic things and also bringing light into the building and things like that. And so this is sort of a strategy we use to sort of push this forward. I think it's very important to mention this is a heavily community-based conversation. This is how we sort of derived the qualities of the building that people love so much, is by asking the questions. I don't know, Brian, if you want to hit on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to actually. This project was a collaboration with LS&S, and it was set to kick off in March 2020. And we all know what we were doing in March 2020, and certainly I don't have to explain what you guys were doing, but just like you, that they were focused on public safety. And in fact, they were worried that this project would have to go on hold or be canceled or redefined, and they just didn't see light at the end of the tunnel in this project. This is an illustration of why it's good to not have to choose between a global firm and a local firm. We were already kind of set up well to work virtually. We collaborate with our other offices, like in London or China or Brazil. There was a library in Brazil we collaborated on. We were already set up for this virtual environment. And so we kind of hit the ground running. And in fact, we sped up. Unfortunately, more meetings in your schedule, and you guys know how this works. But what we're able to do is we're able to spin it to a positive, and the community engagement became a virtual event. All of the follow-up community engagements were virtual events. And the feedback we got from the community every time we re-engaged with them was, I can clearly see that you listened to me. I can clearly see that you picked up the design elements. And not only did you do a good job on it, but I love it. Please keep it going. And you'll kind of see that throughout this. Sorry, I clicked my mouse and got us off. But
sure. Well, yeah, I mean, to Brian's point, this project, was kind of an insulated project a little bit. They called it a library in a park. We really felt like it was a library adjacent to a park. There was really no way to engage the park. The front of the building was austere and uninviting. And so we wanted to connect those two experiences in a better way. So we ran this really special commons space right through the center of the project. And I think in the interest of time, we'll probably flip through these fairly quickly. This community had stated they wanted a home away from home experience. And so we, kind of put that idea on steroids and brought in home style experiences. We brought in a fireplace, we brought in comfortable living room seating, we brought in warmth and more daylight through the ceiling and those skylights. We even brought the park into the building, as you can see that green towards the back. The front of this building was more like a library in a parking lot than a library in a park. So we wanted to bring the green to the front door and celebrate the mid-century modern architecture that was on the existing building.
And it even though there's a first impression brought about on the front facade, this building almost doesn't have a back. And so we had to design something that, the back of the house operations like dumpster enclosures and deliveries were sort of hidden from view because there was access on all sides of this. And it could be very similar to the site that we actually cited the Black Rock Learning Center on.
All right. So, from the get-go, as soon as you walk in the building, we wanted to bring a really public, inviting space. And so this is a space that's more akin to a co-working space than it would be a typical traditional library. And so this is a space that's, potentially open after hours. There's a cafe component, there's computers and a print area that you can, that is sort of a gift to the community. We want this to be a place where you can be okay picking up a phone call and not feel like you're going to get shushed. We try to make certain spaces in this library that are both quiet, but also spaces like this that can be a little bit more lively. There's a ping pong table in this view. We want to really challenge the notion of what a typical library or a learning center in your case can be.
We were surprised by some of the design drivers from the community. And in fact, the top of their list was they wanted this library to be an incubator for business and to allow their community to connect with each other and promote local relationships and businesses. And so they were also looking for this space to be flexible, and they were looking for spaces that could generate revenue for the city and offset some of their costs, but also be some place where they could lend this out to the Boy Scouts for an Eagle Scout ceremony. So those are some of the drivers that led to why it's the shape and design and lighting systems that it was.
Yeah, there's a really great asset in the center of the building, a grand stair. We wanted to make this stair more than just a place to circulate, but a place you could sit and engage. This is kind of in the middle of a commons area that connects a teen area and an adult area and a children's area. And so really we saw this as a sort of a mixing chamber for the generations, really important component of the project. Here's a view of the back. You can see sort of on the left side, that was the library adjacent to the park. We really wanted to create on the right side here a library and a park. And so we wanted to engage the water. We wanted to add doors. We want to engage portions of the site that the library originally turned its shoulder on, like this one. And so, we've really taken advantage of the outside for this library.
They tasked us with give us a building that is not a typical library. And in fact, they've struggled with the idea of calling it a library also. And so, your project being a learning center, I think is an interesting way, how do we demark this? What do we call this building for its future program?
Yeah, and I think we could cycle through some of these exterior shots just to sort of give you a sense of what it feels like on the park side as well. And so there's a final view, an expansion on the right, um, really engaging the outdoors.
Sorry,
No, you're good.
I'm shooting through these just so we can get on the Black Rock. But
Mhm.
the Frisco Public Library, JB, kind of talk us through the
Yeah.
main design driver here.
Yep. So from the get-go, the head librarian Shelley had asked us to create a space, a building that had a uniquely Frisco identity. And so, like a lot of suburbs around Dallas, they are challenged to have a sort of a significant architectural identity. And so, we did a little research on the site, and way back before the building was a manufacturing facility, this existing building, it was in the Blackland Prairie. And I can go on forever about how important Blackland Prairie is to Dallas and everything around it. It's kind of the reason we're here because of its fertile soil. We used that as a kickoff point to inspire some of the major moves we made on this project.
And while the Manske Library was community-based and 100% community-driven for design drivers, this Frisco library, the library director had hired a staff that acted as a committee for this, and they had expertise and specialization within her own staff that asked for this concept and this theme to be carried out throughout the project. It's such a strong theme that, as we oriented the building where the entrance was, got relocated, adaptive reuse of parking efficiencies found on the site, those kind of drove the project back to that Blackland Prairie and this dog trot partie.
Right. So the dog trot is a style of architectural vernacular. It's common primarily in the south of the U.S., but very common to the Blackland Prairie. And we use this as a kickoff point. Actually, this is this picture is actually from Plano. I know someone mentioned that earlier, but it's this vernacular style of architecture. It's a house with two pieces of program split in the middle by a breezeway. The breezeway was called the dog trot. It's where the dog slept. That's how it got its name. But we used that piece of vernacular to give form to two major programmatic pieces, a secured and a non-secured portion of the program.
And for this library, they loved the idea that we were able to root the design in a theme that was teachable. It was a teachable moment for the community. And this library director is embracing STEM activities for field trips, for learning activities on the site, for park spaces all around this. And so this is becoming a theme for them on all of the development around this library, including the library. So this is kind of a section cut through the site. If you're following on the bottom of your screen from left to right, you're at that arrow that shoots back up towards the building, and the site kind of raises back up to it. And there's moments that's illustrated in the rendering here for teaching moments where class can sit in an outdoor environment and engage with that, and then come back in the building. The axis that's cutting through the building also identifies spaces that the city also wanted to make revenue generating, leasable, rentable spaces for performances, so that security was almost a non-issue of which part of the library is clearly understood to be library and as a secured space, and what's the unsecured space. And you start to see that as it's identified on the facade, the existing up on the top right, and then the rendered on below.
Yeah, so the building language we ended up developing for this was really, we wanted two separate languages, a lighter, brighter language for the library proper, which was the secured space, and then the wood language you see on the left, which is defining that non-secured volume. There's a multi-purpose room, a great terrace space that they wanted to be of the appeal for weddings, and so we had to spend a lot of time curating that experience. But the language of those two building volumes are really inspired by the subtle nuances of the prairie and the micro depressions, and the fluttering grasslands that you would find out here in the prairie. And so that was a lot of driver for where we got the aesthetic from. That dog trot experience is right there square in the middle, where you see those, I guess those rockets are flanking it quite nicely there in the middle. But that's sort of that entry experience, is really grand, unique experience that is a lot different from what they have today.
And this is where it pays off, the design acumen that I was speaking to before. That's the great step zero of maximizing a budget. On this project, we realized almost a 20% savings based on initial concepts that the city had run for this. Basically, they had They didn't reskin. They were going to use the existing elevation you see on the top right, and they felt like all the money they had to spend was going to be on the interior of the space. We were able to come in and not have to do away with any of those decisions on the interior and be able to add something to the exterior that was expressive and exciting. This is a view to the north, kind of looking at the reading spaces, but maximizing light, highly sustainable on the site. It engages new activities throughout the site, and like Justin mentioned, it engages with the site quite well.
Yeah, and then on the interior, all these unique interior spaces, each of which are themed after sort of sub-ecology in the Blackland Prairie. So we've got a children's area that's themed from, the questas that we see all over the Blackland Prairie. There's a teen area there as well that's themed after a different ecology. This great stair reminiscent of some of the bluffs we find out here. And so, we brought that same language inside, as we carried it through from the outside.
And we're doing an art program for them right now, kind of building off of what's there. In addition to the art, they're gonna add a huge dinosaur in this space, kind of engaging, and the director has some great visions on how to engage with children in that space. Let's talk about your concept a little bit.
Yeah, so when we do a concept presentation, we really like to get y'all's feedback, and so you're the missing component from this concept. And so the first concept we show people is rarely what the final one looks like, because it's got to go through the gauntlet of sort of what you guys want, what you're looking for, budgets, and all that. We got a really great document from LS&S that they provided to you that really outlined a lot of great potential programmatic goals for this. So we highlighted 4 here. We'll obviously want your input on what those programmatic goals would inevitably be, but we focused on multi-generational hub, business incubator, platform for the arts, and more traditional library services. You can go to the next slide. But we think there's some really valuable experience drivers worth targeting as well. We think this building needs to be sensitive to your context, and so we want to continue the dialogue that's already been started by the administration building, the fire department, and the police department that you guys have already set up. We think connecting to the outdoors is a thing that a lot of people are asking for. We think it's very important, especially now post-pandemic, or I guess still during pandemic, but this idea that people can get outside for a fresh air and read a book. Libraries need to be clearly legible. There need to be clarity of organization when you walk into a space. We can't rely on wayfinding and digital signage. We need to be, when you walk into a space, you need to understand where to go and not feel sort of overwhelmed by that experience. Healthy places are happy places. We think sustainable principles, daylighting, air quality, all those things are valuable. We should keep that at the top of mind as we work through the design. And then finally, libraries they just have to be authentic places. They have to be warm and inviting. They have to encourage people to come in. We don't want people to feel intimidated by the library experience.
Our consulting group would work with you on the kickoff of this project to kind of identify what those were from your perspective. But we went ahead, like Justin mentioned, we went ahead and defined those to kind of give our team the inspiration and drivers for this design.
Yeah. And so, we're going to have conversations with you, but, we want to understand what your purpose is. That purpose will inform a DNA that gives shape to the building. And we can, we don't have to spend much time on these, but these are sort of the experience drivers and the programmatic goals that we noticed in the LS&S document.
Yeah, sustainability and wellness, flexibility of space, all key drivers that, seem appropriate for your concept.
Yeah, and so how are we going to do this? Well, we have 5 strategies here that we are employing on the design you're about to see. One, we want to respond to the vernacular influences of the area, which the adjacent buildings have. We want this building to be visually open from the outside in to encourage people to come in, but we also want people to have visual transparency from the inside out so that they can feel connected to the outdoors and be in a light, bright, and transparent space. We want to implore, purposeful planning strategies and get the right technology in there to help people understand how to get through a space in a clear way. We're going to propose a timber constructed building. We're open to any type of construction. We thought this would be a fun one to start with. It brings warmth into the building, and there's a lot of sustainable reasons why you might consider that. And then finally, this building needs to be designed for the future. So we want honest, enduring materials. We want to avoid trends at all costs. And so all projects, all great projects really start with a strong idea. It's the glue that holds a project together. And so we're going to sort of start talking to you now about an idea for this project. And so we did our research. We have too much research, to be honest. We know your town very well at this point. But the Schweitzer barn is a style of barn that came from the Swiss and the Germans that were here, and I think we've called this the original Pennsylvania barn. That's sort of a name for it, but it's really just defined by its gable roof structure. We can go to the next slide. A lot of the stuff you've already done out there, the police department, the fire station, and the admin building, they all are really, their defining feature is really this gable roof. And so we want to employ that same technique on this building. From a materials perspective, you've got red standing seam roof on all three buildings. You've got expressive structure. There's timber inside each of them, and all of them seem to employ this rubble wall aesthetic. So we want to employ that as well. You'll see in the renderings, but mass timber brings a lot of warmth to the equation. It also has a variety of research that supports it being great for people and their psychology and their health. And then I'd be remiss to mention the free building materials we have: daylight, fresh air, and views. I think these statistics speak for themselves, but we really rely on these as our primary building materials when we design architecture. And so we sited the building at the flattest part of the site. There you see from the left. That portion of the site happened to also be the least wooded section, so we don't have to eliminate as many trees. And then, proper solar orientation is no joke. As far as energy reduction, it's significant. And we think it's always worth siting a building true east-west, or at least 10 to 20 degrees off. And we like the position that it's there next to the fire department. And that gives us some really great views to a potential retention pond and towards the woods. And so the form of this building is really extracted from the Schweitzer barn. We took that and made it an asymmetrical roof frame in order to take advantage of an optimal angle for solar gains on that roof if you wanted to have photovoltaic panels. Then on that third column there, we're really splitting the program into two, very similarly to what we talked about with Frisco, but making a non-secured section that could be, rented out to the public, and a secured volume, to the south of that in the gray. And then this new X form really created 4 unique set spaces: one for a public entry, one for a private backyard, one for the staff, and a really great breakout opportunity up there on the top right for, for an innovation center, which we'll talk about.
And like I mentioned before, you can almost design this where it doesn't have a back door, it doesn't have a backspace, a throwaway facade, so to speak. And so you could have each of these facades reacting differently. This could be the more traditional side as it reacts to the fire station and the vernacular that's there. And as you get away from that, you can start to be more modern and make more modern cues to this as it reacts more into nature.
And so I won't belabor the site plan too much. I know you've seen it, but again, we've created these 4 unique spaces, a staff area over there by the 3 and the 4, this really great drop off at 5 and 6, this great outdoor breakout area for amenity at 7 and 8 in that zone, and then this beautiful backyard. The topography of the site does fall off, even though we found the flattest part. So we will show you in some renderings how you come in at a high level, and then your view really opens up and expands out towards a retention pond to the south. It is parked at a 4 per 1,000, and all that has been accounted for. We only use about 6 acres of the site. There's plenty left on the site afterward. If we hit the high points, this dark black datum line that runs at a diagonal through the building, that'll be seen in the renderings as this rubble wall. It's really defining to the top right a non-secured area, which could be rented out to the public if you wanted, and then the secured zone, which you might consider to be library proper. That green color is the staff area. There's an AMH, a book sorter there in that dark green, and there's an exterior drop-off and an interior drop-off denoted with those number 3s. Right when you walk in, the first thing you see is that purple circulation desk. So that would be the library marketplace. That pink color there, we think, is a great opportunity for that co-working type of experience we talked about with Manske. And then in the non-secured area, we've got an innovation area, which could be career support, workforce development, and all the things listed there. And then community meeting spaces. And so that sort of, go for it.
Oh yeah, it gives you great opportunities to create main axes for self-autonomous, walking around this building.
Exactly.
One of the things we've learned from all of our library projects, library directors are concerned about their staffing levels and having staff as resources pulled away to tell people where to go and help them move around this building and find what they're looking for, and investigate what this building and the program has to offer for them. And so using this rubble wall throughout the project to kind of orient people into this, clearly what's public, clearly what's more private, what staff spaces, and what spaces are left over in between, create great little moments, like maybe there's an art gallery, or maybe there's a place here for some civic pride. Maybe this is a shared space. Maybe there's some local artists that could populate this space. And you could have receptions and kind of talk to their collections.
Exactly, yeah. That innovation area, we think flexibility is key here. We're just really showing color blocks for areas. There will be some internal walls there, but we do like the idea of promoting flexibility so that this space can be changeable to whatever type of experience you want to create. So it may be bifurcated into multiple rooms at some time. That may open up to a more performance type of experience. There's some images on the left here of spaces that are very sort of configurable to be, different throughout the year. But for us, flexibility is key for any library.
These are the kind of spaces that your local community partners love to sponsor. And this is another way for cost savings, to find spaces that they would want to sponsor and want to be a part of, and maybe be a partner in using that space.
And so this gets us to the lower level. We're really not overlapping a lot of program. We just need to sort of get down to grade. That's why we have this really beautiful monumental stair we see there with number 1 that can be sat on and engaged. The collections area is all off to the left. So we have children's and adult off to the left. The blue area off to the right is teens. And then we've always liked to position the Makerspace close to the teens because it sort of acts as like an in-house IT service. They always fix problems and it helps out the library staff. But this ground level really makes up the collections area. We think it's very important to introduce glass there along that southern face so that we can have a really great indoor-outdoor engagement from the collections and the reading area, and then have an outdoor reading room just outside. We think there's opportunity to extend that outdoor space even further if we can bring in some water for water retention and collections. It could be a really great space.
Yeah, and a lot of our libraries, the directors ask us to make sure that we spend time on the teen services and that we pace our design so we're not just looking at the children's areas and the design for the children's areas, because sometimes you can get caught up in that and almost ignore the teen services. It becomes an afterthought. It's really important to make sure that they're sited in a place that kind of befits where a teen would want to occupy that space. They're not adults yet. They're not kids anymore. They want their own space, and I can speak to that, attest with my 15 and 17-year-old.
Sure. So this is the really the first time you're seeing a rendering of the space. Here at the left side is really that Schweitzer style barn extrusion all the way through. Along, you see that standing seam, that red standing seam metal roof that's akin to the other administration buildings you have there. We've introduced skylights or glass on that roof so that we can get that great northern light deep into the space. We've used that sort of gabled roof profile as a way to protect people who are sort of sitting under it. So that could be a great breakout space for the innovation area. And then beyond in the distance, you can see that rubble wall, that datum line that we took all the way through the building to help define the non-secured and the secured side. And we just want to sort of play that up as a primary feature that sort of runs through the project.
Kind of see it peeking through over here.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Looking at the entry here, you see that rubble wall sort of shooting through the building. We like how sort of low this side is, but as we go towards the back of the project, you'll see it opens up quite a lot. We feel like this is a much more approachable entry than if we had sort of the larger volume on the entrance side. We do think that you could open up this plaza area for events. If you wanted to have farmer's market or something out here, we could make this sort of a curbless experience if we wanted to, but there's a lot of potential for this front area.
Yeah, some of the trends that our clients are asking us to design for are having food trucks or events, or designing specifically around certain events. They want to know, where's my Christmas tree go? Where's my public event for this? On the 4th of July, we shoot fireworks over here. Can I offer VIP experiences? What can I offer for the public in this? This is set up actually quite nicely to plan out those kind of activities.
And so here's our first view from the interior, sort of standing at the top of that monumental staircase. Off to the right, we have a black metal panel wall that's separating the admin area. The admin has visual access down to the collections and a quick access stair internally. Off to the left, we're showing expansive glass just to really celebrate those great views out to the wooded area and a potential water collections area, retention area if we need it. We've got our very deep overhang with the CLT roof continuing outside to protect the seating area against the glass from direct solar gains. We'll obviously need to consider some sort of shading solution there as well. But we really think this really creates a very open space and has a lot of potential.
There are ways to detail out, for instance, the southern glazed wall and the west glazed wall, so that you don't use expensive curtain wall systems where you use storefront, systems that you see at retail that are easy to maintain, easy to find parts, easy to install, less labor. So as we go through this process, as we identify this as a key driver of something we want, we would then start to work with manufacturers to start to figure out what are the costs here, what are our opportunities, since we have the superstructure that's free span and is carried by the mass timber structure. Does it offer us savings? These are lessons learned that Justin and I have found on other libraries that we kind of dialed into this. And keep in mind, this is a first draft. We wouldn't build the first draft. We wouldn't propose the first draft. This is just to get the conversation going and to figure out if there are drivers here that you identify with that you want us to explore more, or something you clearly don't want to go in this direction now that you've been put in the space and you understand what it looks like. You want to go in a different direction. On the previous designs we showed you in the Manske library and the Frisco library, we went through several iterations in their quick succession. We do this in Revit, which is a building integrated 3D model. We build it in this computer environment. It's actually faster for us to do this, and we can do quick line renderings. So we'll meet with you at 9 o'clock, for example. We get out of the meeting at 10 o'clock. You've given us comments, and we go put on our white lab coat and go into our laboratory and go work with designers to figure out solutions. By the end of that day, sometimes next day, we get you solutions back so it's fresh in your mind to see, did we touch on what were the key drivers for you?
Yeah, and then I think just the final rendering, sort of a view from the south side, looking back at the building. It's a lot more expansive, like we said. We love the idea that we can bring the wood outside and maybe engage, a retention pond if we need it. You can see that rubble wall strongly come through, and we saw it on the front. Now we're seeing it on the back. We're showing photovoltaic panels on that roof, but there's a real opportunity here to take advantage of the outside space. I think traditionally libraries have steered away from that due to security reasons. There's solutions now in place where we can sort of make this happen in a more effective way. And so we'd be interested in exploring that with you. But great opportunity to create a really great outdoor space back here.
So Justin and Brian, thank you so much. This is Debbie. I just wanted to mention we've got about 7 minutes left. So just wanted to do a little time check. Thank you.
That was our presentation. We have some other slides that are put in there to help illustrate for questions and answers. And are we opening the floor, Debbie, for questions and answers?
Tim, do we have time for a couple of questions, or what would you like us to do?
I wanted to make sure we left a few minutes for the board to ask any questions, or they're probably processing what they just saw, but I didn't know if anybody would like to ask any questions. Lori, I think you may have seen parts of this presentation before, and I know you had some questions regarding the energy with all the windows and stuff. I think that was one question you had, but
well, there were kind of two. It's all the windows and the energy, and the fact that for me, I've been in houses that have had beam ceilings that go up to the second floor, and I knew where all the heat was going to be, and it wasn't going to be near me.
Yeah, I mean, these are great points. Doing a project, concept this quickly, there's a lot of things that still need to be vetted. We do think a volume of ceiling is important, and air supply from below is achievable. We have been entertaining here recently doing raised access floors to supply heat to keep the heat low, before it moves up. And those are some things we can continue to explore. There's a lot of glass here, we wanted to celebrate these views. There's an appropriate balance there. So it's picking the right low E efficient glazing. It's picking the right shading strategies. We've made an attempt at that by extending the roof sort of beyond the glass. But we have a lot of built-in in-house modeling capabilities where we can test all this in real-time parameters and really get an understanding of what the heat loading is going to be. So those are things we would do if we continue to work on this.
And in fact, these were some of the drivers, some of the questions we had on the Frisco library, which has a double height space as well on it, and much more solar gain coming from the west side on that site. So these models that Justin's talking about, we ran those to identify what is the strategy, where should we spend our money, where and work back with the design the library director and her staff to figure out what's most important to you as we rank this hierarchy in this space. And we went with an underfloor delivery system. And the models indicate from that underfloor delivery system, which would work in your temperature zones as well, that heat doesn't escape that 10 to 12 foot strata. And in fact, what it does is it offers a wonderful air exchange, which actually works out quite well in the COVID environment for a long-term health concern. One of the things that's making our spaces safe right now in schools is they had focused on using like a MERV 8 or a MERV 13 filter on their equipment for one, but they also had a wonderful air exchange in their systems. This would offer a wonderful air exchange in this system for a long-term healthier environment. And I think we've all learned there's benefits to this kind of healthy wellness design beyond the COVID environment.
Hey, this is Tim. Chris Holler, are you on? Didn't know if you.
Yep, I'm here, Tim.
Yeah, did you? I remember you and I were talking about, a lot of this whole concept started before COVID, and we were talking about what's the rethinking of the pandemic on space issues. Did you want to maybe articulate that in a better question?
No, I think that says it perfectly, Tim. We were wondering in the world of COVID now and where you go from here, where it really started driving the remote aspects of work and learning. Where is that taking these concepts moving forward? And does that create larger office areas where you have two people sharing a space where 300 square foot used to be the norm? Are you seeing that going up to 500 square feet for two people?
We are in some instances. So for huddle rooms, meeting rooms, those are being smaller size. We're not seeing meeting rooms anymore for 20 to 30 people as a priority. But most of this has become, for a lot of our libraries right now, is our space centered. So they'll go through their furniture plans and identify what is the ultimate build out long term when we have this more under control, when we're more confident. But it has influenced their wellness thinking about how dense some of the furniture areas are, and using furniture and strategic areas for circulation to make sure that those areas are broken up and don't look like they're broken up on purpose. So a lot of our projects are doing that. The Manske library did it, the Frisco library did it. It was about spacing. The furniture is the most flexible component within the building design itself, and keeping these spaces free and open is the key driver for the long-term success and flexibility of these spaces. If you think back, just like technology, HVAC system, 10 or 15 years ago, we had no idea where we'd be today. And those drivers, talking about how flexibility influenced those projects 10 to 15 years ago to where we are today, is just a paradigm shift compared to this. So what we've learned from that is right setting the project to make sure it's as flexible as possible for multiple uses. It kind of indicates that, and the COVID strategies are dovetailed along that.
One of the other questions I had, it came up from one of the meetings we had with some of the supervisors administration. How does your design concept and what do you do as far as design goes with special needs individuals? And that's not necessarily physical needs. ADD, where someone may have a difficult time focusing in a large open area such as what's on the screen right now. Maybe providing some acoustical items where you have the open feeling, but it's more of a closed in as far as sound goes environment, or if there's areas where you can visually kind of feel like you're in more of a private area while maintaining this large open concept.
I'm glad you asked that because this is something that I'm really excited about lately. We have tools that are available. Justin mentioned the models that we look at for the solar gain and the overall efficiency for mechanical systems and where glazing is strategically located. There are also models that we're partnering with our acoustic consultants where they will run a real model and be able to test it through that Revit model where the acoustics work well and what the criteria is for each of those spaces. So the Frisco library is working off of something called a 4-space model. And it's interesting in that the 4-space model doesn't apply necessarily to libraries. It applies to a myriad of different projects, and you can kind of look it up later. But what they've driven is you could have a noisy space next to a quiet space next to a performance space next to a flexible space that could be used for anything else. And how do you delineate between those uses acoustically and visually? Well, the way you used to do it is you used to have physical barriers or baffles. And now with the way that we're able to apply acoustic materials and acoustic strategies, you're able to control that noise in each of those spaces so that you don't notice it on the opposite side. And our office is one of those spaces that uses that strategy where I might sit, 18 feet from Justin, but I can't hear what he's saying until I go over to him. He can have a private conversation, but we're still in an open and feels like an open collaborative environment. You kind of get the best of both worlds. And one of the strategies that we would probably envision using on this project, if you like the wood look of it, there are materials and manufacturers that offer the wood look in a perforated unit. And so it looks like wood. It doesn't. It's not susceptible to UV loss, degradation of look. It's easy to clean and maintain, but it actually has acoustic values to it. So when you look at the space, you think, oh, it's an open, vast, loud space. I'm going to be able to hear what someone's doing on that far side. It just wouldn't be the case passively. I'm really excited about those kind of models.
I think we're at 6:50. Where are we right now? 6:57. I think we've done a pretty good job. Bill or John, any questions? Or are you still digesting this?
Well, I'm digesting. Tim, when you sent out your target budget with your a few weeks ago, what was that? Was that this design? Were they?
I'll let Chris talk. We're going to talk about that on recap, and that, keep in mind, this is just very high level. Chris Holler, do you want to just talk a little bit about your the budget?
What we did with the budget, Bill, I worked with Debbie on this, and we took pretty much both of the concepts and developed a program that was out of that. And I believe when Tim sent you the preliminary budget estimate, there was a proposed program that was put into a spreadsheet as well. And it was kind of defining some square footages for some of the different spaces, and it came up to with an overall building square footage, which I know we were talking about 25,000 square feet. The program's at 26,780. So the preliminary budget that you have in front of you is just based on a building that is 26,780 square feet. The library, the firehouse came in, if you take out site, about 355, 360 a square foot. So just for preliminary purposes, we're at 375 a square foot, just figuring you're going to have some more high-end finishes than you had in the firehouse. Not saying it's going to be high and expensive stuff, but it's going to be a little bit nicer because it's more of a public area than what the firehouse was. So that's kind of where that budget started.
Okay.
Bill, I was going to, when we get down to the recap and next steps, I thought that would where we can drill down on that a little bit. So.
Okay.
Debbie, what's the plan? Are we kind of phasing in the other group? How did you want to do it?
Yes, actually, they're trying to log in, Tim, so they're using the link that we sent today, but I did want to thank Brian and Justin for the time and great work, and thank you guys very much. It's
Well,
really,
thank you very much for everything you put into this to help the township out.
Yeah, it's
Thanks for
really,
the opportunity.
By
Thanks
the
for
way,
the
guys,
opportunity. I hope it showed we had fun.
When I get back to Frisco one of these days, I want to visit that library. I said Plano earlier, but I lived in Frisco.
Oh, great.
When I moved there in it was 85, it was about 10,000 residents.
you should have bought then, Bill.
Yeah, what are they now? A 250,000, I think.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh,
about
the
that.
farmland went. Yeah, the farmland went up. Yeah, we could have speculated on that if we could go back in time.
Yeah, I was amused a few years ago when I watched one of the bowl games being played there in Frisco.
Yeah.
If I could just have 30 seconds to talk about budget. I know you guys mentioned a total square footage, and you may have a target in mind for cost per square foot for that. The same thing was given to us on the Manske library and the Frisco library, and I could just go through a myriad of the other projects, whether it's historic preservation or courthouses that I'm working on. Justin and I have been able to take these early decision models and kind of find opportunities for savings. You know, for instance, if we show the wood look or the storefront glazing look, several different manufacturers at different price points offer solutions for that. On each of these projects, we ranged between probably 15 and 22% savings overall. Again, it's just getting a grapple and making decisions early in the process when you incur the least amount of risk. Just not patting ourselves on the back, but that's a distinguishing factor that we kind of have to offer on this.
No, I agree with you, Bill. Early decisions are critical to keeping track of the budget. Like, just like, this was early on for you, the budget estimate is early on for us too. And I'd rather come in with something that's practical and beat it.
Well said. You're not a hero before you start. Yeah.
hey, Brian, and board members, Helene joined me in my office, so she's to my right.
Yeah, I have a quick
Go ahead.
question. When you say you saved the 22%, how can you just unpack that quickly? I know we're at time, but how was
and I'll let Justin talk about specifically what he did, but if I could go back to this concept real quick. If I could go, Justin, I wanted to kind of talk to the facade. So on the Frisco library, like I mentioned, the facade treatment was added onto the project, and we are able to find about $6.75 million of savings. Like I mentioned, they were just going to go with the interior, not the exterior portions. So we came up with this idea that actually added square footage and is costing the city less money for this solution. And so, and I'm oversimplifying it, not because I don't love Justin, but Justin reached out to manufacturers and said, this is the look we're going for. What do you have to offer? This is what doing a lot of projects helps us with. We kind of have these partnerships with these national firms. They want these projects, and they're excited about the design as well. And they're like, well, I have a product that does this. And if you shorten the span of this, instead of 22 feet to 16 feet, we can save you 15% savings. This is where those early design decisions start to come in, and doing this in a BIM model in a smart environment helps us toggle through all those decisions. I'm sure I didn't give it justice, Justin, but
it's I guess the short of it is it's a labor of love going through the 3D model, equating square footages to cost per square foot, finding the right products that fit in that square footage, pushing and pulling until we get into a budget that makes sense, working with our mechanical engineers to optimize the mechanical system. It's kind of a laborious effort, but we really take seriously budgets, and we want to fit in them 100% of the time. So we believe that it's architects can be lazy and really push, one aesthetic at all costs. We think we can get to a great aesthetic in a budget, and so it's just a labor of love, and you just have to really work the materials and the square footages. So,
And it's the BIM model too as well. A lot of these contractors are savvy enough to take that BIM model and give it to their subs and tell them bid this. And drawings are abstractions. They're 2D abstractions, and you have a spec with it that is a narrative abstraction of what we're looking for. And they might look at a rendering and say, I think I see where they're going. When you give them a BIM model to actually price, they can pull that apart and say, here are my components. I know how this attaches. I can see which method they used. The other thing that we do in our models is we don't wing it. And what I mean by that is if we don't invent details that the manufacturers won't stand behind and don't know, and their contractors don't use all the time, when they see something that's an unknown, they throw money at it and they don't know what kind of money to throw at it. And a lot of times that can't be made up. Even if you define it later on in the bid process, you get pennies back on the dollar from the contractor because I've already made a commitment. Doing this early, partnering with these manufacturers, that enables us to kind of dial it in.
How much did you say that you saved here?
$6.75 million. This was
What was the overall budget?
the overall is 62 million. It's a $42 million construction budget. And we're able to find $6.75 million savings on a bigger footprint.
and that was just construction budget. Yeah. That was
Just going
off
from
the
top
construction,
right,
yeah.
and it is under budget. It is on the city council agenda. They just took bids the other day. This will be under construction soon.
We're on time, guys, so I think I'd like to thank Brian and Justin for your time.
Of
Not
course.
trying to find a nice soft cutoff here.
Thanks,
Debbie,
everyone.
if any questions come up, you have my contact information. I'm happy to follow up with any other questions.
Great job.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really nice renderings.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Mhm.
Right.
Good night.
Tim, would you like me to?
Yeah, could you? I'm
introduce-
going to try to get us on the, I'm going to try to, if you could introduce the other two people from Clearscapes.
Absolutely.
So.
So we have Fred Belladin, who works with Clearscapes Art and Architecture. Fred and his team are based in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've worked with Fred and his team on another project just recently. So, another really excellent team, easy to work with. Fred, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
I'm going to promote you to panelist here, Fred, just a second.
You've already gotten a promotion.
Okay.
Congrats.
Is it just Fred, Debbie? Anyone else?
I believe just Fred is here tonight.
I actually have Brandy Thompson, one of my partners, is
Okay.
here as well tonight.
Apologies, Brandy.
Uh,
problem.
I have your presentation, Fred, but if you'd like to, I know sometimes it's better if you do the screen yourself. I can give you screen sharing rights. What do you prefer?
Whatever's easier for you is fine.
Just tell me when to, that's the first slide I have. So if you'd like, just prompt me when you'd like me to move on.
Sure. So this is pretty informal. Debbie and Todd had asked us, they had filled us in on some of your goals for this project and asked us to take a look at some of the program concepts and how they might fit within this particular site. So the first portion of this deck is really just a general introduction to some of the program spaces that we understand you all have been talking about that we could walk through. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we're starting to see across the board, not just in libraries, but really all of our community program projects, are flexible gathering spaces. A lot of folks are looking for multivalent rooms, programs, and spaces that can support informal use as well as formal programming. A couple of images here from some different projects. A lot of these are stadium style steps and amphitheaters that can function informally for seating, as well as host a range of programs and spaces. Next slide, please. Makerspace was one of the uses that Debbie had mentioned. We were excited to see this. We're starting to see this more in public projects. For instance, one of the programs that we work a lot with here in Raleigh is the Explorus Kids Museum, or now Marbles Kids Museum. They've got a lot of makerspace that they've integrated in with this. And also in particular, being an art and architecture studio, we actually have our own shop where we create a lot of our own public art and custom components as well. So this is a use that's near and dear to our heart. Next slide, please. Obviously, the core of the traditional library are the book stacks and reading areas. A lot of what we're working on with libraries is trying to locate some of the reading areas where they've got public access and public views to surrounding parks and public infrastructure. Next slide, please. Co-working and video conferencing is something that we're seeing an increasing amount of, in particular with COVID and the anticipated post-COVID environments. We're starting to see a lot of work from home, and in particular, we're starting to see a lot of small businesses abandon traditional office space in favor of work from home with access to facilities that can allow for client meetings, as well as touchdown spaces. Podcast studio, again, this is really taking off with the pandemic environment. A lot of people are creating their own programming and creating their own videos for clients and other user groups. Next slide, please. One of the interesting ideas that we heard for this facility was a potential demonstration or training kitchen. We do a lot of food service work, a lot of hospitality work, working with chefs. So training kitchens are a great idea. They do introduce a different level of regulatory oversight, program, and budget as well. So this would be an area we would want to work with you carefully to understand the program and what the exact goals for this kitchen facility would be. One of the particularly interesting things about your site is the partially natural and partially man-made landscape that exists around the construction of the fire station, particularly that mound. One of the things we do a lot here in North Carolina with our climate is the integration of indoor and outdoor facilities as well. For us, we generally can use these spaces 9 months a year. In Pennsylvania, I know you're a little less of a seasonal window for that, but this again becomes an amenity that oftentimes you'll see in use even when the library or other public facility itself is closed. Next slide, please. In looking at some of your existing town buildings, we wanted to understand the overall forms that you look at, where your tastes tend to run as a community, from traditional to more modern, and what materials and details you tend to like. So in looking at this facility in particular, looks like a lot of the kind of transitional architecture that we see and the work we do in Pennsylvania with the metal roofs, the traditional gabled forms, but the introduction of some modern elements and detailing. Next slide, please. So this is an example, different style, different context from one of our more recent library projects. This is in a smaller town in North Carolina, Cary, North Carolina. This site is actually located across the street from a red brick elementary school. And for this particular project, the town wanted us to pull some of the traditional forms and elements from that school building, but introduce a lot of glass and some modern details because this site sits at the corner of a large public park project that they are working on. Next slide, please. So for your site in particular, we spent a little bit of time looking at the existing site with the fire station obviously in orange in the upper right corner, and the mound, as we're calling it, that exists over towards the left, slide left, with the topography sloping down towards the bottom. So for us, one of the things that we found particularly compelling was the opportunity to actually integrate in with the mound form that's being created to create a two-story library. where we could actually start to program the levels to adjust to the specific environment. Next slide, please. So in this particular case, and this is very preliminary, we obviously have not had any conversations with your group or your user group or library group, but one notion was that the upper level could be a more adult focused space, a little separate from some of the activity and kids programming down below, that would actually open out at grade onto the top of the mound, creating an indoor-outdoor relationship with a large porch overlooking the mound. In this particular spot, we'd include potentially adult and teen collection, as well as some of the meeting and program spaces and that demo or teaching kitchen that you've been interested in. To the right here, you can start to see labeled as arts and culture, really a double height space that starts to terrace down with the landscape to create, again, an informal spot for reading and gatherings, as well as a formal programming space that could handle concerts, events, and lectures. Next slide, please. Sorry, skipped ahead a little bit there. Could hold on one sec. I've got a little. Apologies for that. I have kids in school still. The lower level we envision potentially as a more active space that would include the children's collection with an opportunity to, again, create some indoor-outdoor integration with a children's outdoor play area accessed directly off of their program area, as well as some of the more active spaces like the media space and maker spaces. And then again, to your right, you can see the lower level of that seat step amphitheater component that also extends out into the landscape. Next slide, please. And these are some very early images just to start to understand how the building could integrate into the site and the landscape. There's not a lot of emphasis on materiality yet within these renderings, but you can start to see the potential for that forced theater type outdoor environment that segs smoothly into the building, into an indoor seat step environment, and then continues out into the program spaces within the library. Slide, please. Thank you. And then this would be a view from the upper level of that meadow. Again, with this project in particular, we were trying to work with a very simple gable roof form that ties into some of your other existing buildings, civic buildings, but also allows for a more modest and cost-effective approach to overall form making, allowing us to really emphasize the light views and connections between indoor and outdoor. So that's a very brief overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions as you think about the process and what you might envision with this space.
Open up for questions from the board. Chris, do you have any ice-breaking cost questions? Or
Yeah, I got a couple questions for you. With COVID these days, you kind of touched on it with the distant learning and working from home and having the spaces available where small businesses could come in. What other impacts are you seeing? And I'm thinking like, you know, an office space, a shared office space for two people pre-COVID, 250, 300 square feet was probably sufficient, depending on what they did. Are you seeing that going up to 500 square feet for two people sharing a space now? Those kinds of things.
It's a great question. In terms of the specific space requirements for elements like offices, we're really seeing it go in both directions with our clients. We're seeing some clients up space allocations, as you're describing. The goal is to keep everybody within a fixed office environment, and they're simply providing more space to provide more separation. Conversely, we're seeing a number of our clients actually move away from that fixed office model and moving more towards a touchdown model, where it's a series of smaller shared spaces with some locker and storage environments where people are using or reserving offices on an as-needed basis. So they're actually looking at trying to utilize less square footage per person with the expectation that not everybody will be occupying those spaces full time. From a technical perspective, we touched on a little bit of that. Obviously, I'm sure you're hearing a lot about modifications to HVAC systems with UV filters, things like that. Obviously, a lot of what we're looking at is trying to change air distribution and return through public spaces. Typically, air tends to be pushed horizontally through most buildings. It's the most cost-effective way to do it. But if you're trying to minimize potential transmission, you're actually seeing some folks start to think more about vertical distribution and vertical return, where we're trying to pull air directly up from above people to minimize the amount of horizontal transmission that we could potentially incur.
One of the other questions I had was, how do you integrate design and try to maintain the open concepts, the open feels for individuals with special needs? And I'm not just talking physical special needs, someone in a wheelchair or things like that. It's more along the ADD and maybe some of the mental special need elements, where an individual may need that quiet space to be able to concentrate, but to not make that quiet space a small closed in room so it still has an open feel to it. How does stuff like that get integrated into design?
That's a great question. And to be honest, I can't say I've had that one asked by a client before. To provide you just a little bit of an anecdote, our firm was actually founded in 1981 by an artist and an architect. And the artist and the architect met one another when they were creating environments for special needs individuals through the state mental health system. So what you're describing is something also near and dear to our heart. A lot of this would come down to the architectural concepts of prospect and refuge. And by that, what I mean is, as human beings, especially for some folks that are challenged by special needs, you tend to want to create a spot where you have a view and you feel like you can participate within some of the activities going on around you, but not be a direct part of the activities. Or you're trying to create a sheltered space for other program activities where there's a comfort level and you can start to minimize the distractions. So obviously what you're describing within an office environment or an open environment, is probably the most challenging environment to do the latter. So a lot of it would have to do with creating some lower medium height walls, systems furniture, a lot of sound absorptive materials, and thinking carefully about how we program adjacencies between some of these spaces for special needs individuals in terms of the overall library environment. And by that, I mean, there will be some more active uses where a little higher acoustic and visual level of stimuli is acceptable. There'll be others where they really want to study and maintain some quiet with what they're doing. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think so.
Bill, I think you had a question.
Well, I was just going to open up with what Lori asked the last architect about energy efficiency, all glass, and we need these buildings to be energy efficient going into the future too.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The value of glazing obviously comes in daylighting opportunities, minimizing natural light use throughout the day, and then at an architectural level, creating connection to the surrounding environment. So with these renderings that we're showing, it obviously is a very simple glass shed at this point in time. The reality is that through a design process, the location and amount of glazing would be targeted to those most important areas to create connections between the inside and the outside. There are glazing opportunities. Technology is improving in terms of low E glass in terms of heat gain, and also with calibrating overhangs, but then also even just the ROE value of the glass for direct thermal transmission. But you are right, if your goal, especially if you're looking at a LEED silver or some sort of environmental program, it would probably not be the level of glass that we're showing in this building in these conceptual renderings.
Okay.
I hear a pause, a long pause, so I think this brings us to closure. I think we got done a little early, Mr. Chairman. We can, if there's no other questions, we can get started on some of our discussions on the possible next steps and recap of what we've processed so far.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys from Clearscapes. It was a good presentation and another set of ideas for us to think about. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to
Thank
have
you,
the
guys.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fran and
Thank you very
Brandy.
much.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
I think all the architects are off, so we can have a discussion, Mr. Chairman, as far as our next steps. This was really designed to just be a very high level discussion. And I wanted Chris, I think you guys have gotten some of the preliminary financial costs based if you did this whole thing. I was talking to Brian earlier. I don't think Brian is on the line still. I think as we struggle with moving forward, do we want to try to learn from our past mistakes and make sure that we build something that's functional and expandable in the future and is affordable and all that stuff. So would like to hear everybody else's reflections, Brian, and Chris and Bill. You and I talked earlier about some other interim steps as far as capital financing and the nonprofit organizations, and get a more formalized working committee in place. I don't know where you want to start on some of those thoughts. So.
Yeah, the building needs to be highly flexible. I appreciated the first architectural firm talking about large open spaces, and they can be reconfigured over time. Just simply the cost of this is kind of daunting to me. The initial numbers I've seen, I hate to go back to a model, but a model that's working in the township next door of Lower Providence is similarly sized. Like I said, that's why I mentioned about Frisco. Frisco is a town of about 250,000 people. So that's obviously a much larger tax base. I didn't get the chance to ask him if that was the only library in town at this point. My guess would be no, but so I just I'm a little concerned about costs, and I'm also concerned. Like I talked with Supervisor Higgins this afternoon, and we were talking about, if we're going to get a 503c, a library trust, a Friends of Upper Providence Library going, we really kind of need that to start first, even ahead of the township making any commitments to see, is there, when we asked the question on our Parks and Rec survey, what do you want? We didn't put price tags on any of this stuff. So of course, yes, people want a library. Yes, people want an extensive trailer network, but nobody talked about who was going to pay for it or how. And so I kind of feel like we need to maybe have an executive session later this year with the supervisors and figure out, where do we want to go with this, and what's the right sizing of the project. I feel we're a little oversized at this point on what we're proposing, but I may be wrong about that. So and I'm just one person's opinion. So go.
I'd like to chime in if I may. I have to agree 100% with Bill. When I go out to buy a car, I need to know how much money I have in the bank before to know that I can go out and afford such and such. Whether I have the money in my pocket or whether I know that I can get the financing for it, or know where to go get the financing, I need to know the figures on all of this. So, and I agree with Bill thinking, well, maybe we're a little bit premature here, jumping into this thing. Is there anybody in any of these groups, anybody out there that has any idea as to who can help finance any of this stuff? I have my own ideas, but just wondering if anybody else has any ideas as where the money's going to come from, other than raising it. Well, one thing that maybe I think we need to consider, maybe putting this if we're gonna put this on the shoulders of the residents, maybe we need to put this on a referendum and see if the residents want this and see if they're willing to take a hit tax-wise to see if we can go ahead and at least start this project and try to find some more financing on the way. So those are just my thoughts.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking was the residents really need to have a buy-in here. I think it would be great if it were more from the ground up rather than us building it and it's top down. This is a huge price tag for one. For another, both of these designs to me, they're not double height, they're triple height. They're just incredibly huge, too tall. But I really want to drill down into, yeah, like Bill mentioned, people want whatever. They want a library. Are they really going to use it? Are they really going to commit to saying, oh yeah, I'll help you. I'll help raise money. I'll start a 501c3 or whatever nonprofit to build it from the ground up, from the community ground up. Mission Viejo, California, when I lived there, that's what happened there is they had a problem with the county library and they started their own fundraiser to build their own library. I would like to see some, like I said, buy-in, some commitment from the residents and where they're leading. And then we come along behind them and say, sure, we'll help you build this. Also, Melissa Schusterman, early on in our focus groups, you know, she's big on libraries and I'm sure she can find us some state money if we get, you know, Melissa and Joe Webster and Katie Muth in on this. We can get some grant money, but I don't know where I am on this right now.
You know what, and I want to throw my 2 cents in right on the tails of that is that to me, the bigger concern is the ongoing cost. You know, okay, what's going to be like maybe 15 million to build, but that's a drop in the bucket if it's going to be these ongoing costs. And I want to make sure that we have that covered and we cross every T and dot the I. And I like the idea of going back to the residents and saying, you said you wanted a library, but are you willing to take this increase in taxes to cover it? Because I'm afraid of where the money's going to come from. And that brings us back to the survey that we were going to do, and hopefully we could pass it next week, that will give us a better roadmap on things like that.
Well, just as a for instance, I did talk to Kara, one of the supervisors in Lower Providence, and asked what are your operating costs each year for the library, and she said in the township budget it's $500,000 a year, which I don't think is that expensive. I mean, I was actually kind of pleased to hear that number for operating costs. They employ, I'm sure they employ their librarians directly and what other staff they need. And then she mentioned that, you know, a lot of library costs are borne by the library trust down there, you know, the Friend of Lower Providence Library, whatever it's called. But so, yeah, well, I'm with Lori. I'd like to see a little more groundswell from the community. And and that's maybe up to us to lead that, to go out and see, you know, find people who are interested and, you know, let them beat the bushes and find out what the interest is here. You know, these are gorgeous designs they had, but, you know, like I said, my model is looking at a township of about our size and about our financial position in Lower Providence. And I look at their library and I think, yeah, we could do that, but I don't know if we could do more than that. So, you know, that's just where I'm at on this. But
Hey, Bill, I have a quick question to you. If the committee that runs the library in Lower Providence goes to the supervisors in the township and asks for 500,000, do you know the amount of money they raise themselves? I just want to get the overall cost.
Brian, would you know that? If Brian's still on, I know you.
I can get that for you.
Okay.
I know that, like Bill alluded to, I think the number that I heard from Don, LP's manager, was $600,000 a year towards the library. So the $500,000 sounds spot on. What that consists of, whether that's any debt service or strictly operating, I don't know. I could meet with Don and find that out though.
So they may only raise 100,000 a year. They're asking township.
I have a copy of their budget.
Okay.
I can take a look at that.
yeah, that might be a good place to start investigating. And you know, they have a nice building down there, and about a quarter of the building is a glass wall that looks out over the meadow behind the library. But it's a pretty simple building. It's I like I said, I was surprised that when the price came in a little higher than the firehouse. So that was
Hey, Bill, in light of the fact that all the board members' comments have seemed to focus on finances in one way or another, although the board hasn't authorized it yet, the PFM study will be again on the board agenda next Tuesday evening.
Yep.
Perhaps we take a brief hiatus for a few months until that study is in. Maybe that'll give the board a better basis on which to make a grounded decision.
I agree with you, Brian.
Yep. It'll make me feel better.
Well, PFM will be doing it. It'll be a holistic overview of not just this type of project, but some of our other issues with stormwater and some of our fire and operating costs. And I think we all have, we all want some certainty, or at least some better guidance on where our fiscal clouds are going to be in the next couple of years. So
did we have any members of the public on the workshop tonight listening in, or?
No, I think, well, we have our reliable, I think Karen, are you on? Karen D'Angelo is.
Yes, I'm here.
She's our resident. She's at a lot of our workshops. She's with the County Library Association.
Okay.
She and I talk, by the way, Karen, do you want to tell everyone your news?
Hi, I'm Karen D'Angelo. I'm the district consultant librarian until March 1st, and then I will be the executive director.
So she just got promoted, so.
Thank you. Kathy's retiring
So.
on February 28th. I can get you any of the budget information comparisons that you'd like of comparing from the annual reports. Just let me know which libraries you'd like it for, and I can do that.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. And I'm sure you understand our trepidation is just, I don't want to take too much off that we can't chew. I want to make sure that we can afford this moving forward.
And they are not adding any libraries at this time to the state library. So that would not be an option for at least several years.
Okay.
But I'd love to talk to you about ways we could work with you as the library that's serving you now.
Which one is that?
Right now it's Royersford.
Okay. I've been to Lower Providence, and I've been to Phoenixville.
The Royersford branch of our library. You're one of our service areas, but we can talk about other ways we could work things out.
Okay.
Bill, just so you know, we donate a chunk of change to, I think, Royersford.
Okay.
For which we are very grateful.
You're very welcome.
It's never enough, is it, Karen?
We have to pay $5 per cap. We have to spend $5 per capita as a library per state law.
Okay.
We give more than Limerick, though. Just for the record.
I'm gonna let that.
Bill, I think we all need a chance to digest this, and I have some thoughts going around in my mind that I'd like to try to put down on paper that makes sense, and maybe come up with some strategic directions we may want to take. And I think a lot of it starts with our PFM study. I think we need to get a pretty good handle on our fiscal, capital and operating costs. And I think that document is supposed to be, if we get it rolling, should be done by late March, early April, to give us at least a roadmap so we can continue our planning later this year. So
and we know we're on the austere COVID budget for this year. I mean, that's what we're going to spend in 2021. But yeah, we will need to start looking forward and figure out. We've got a lot of projects on the board that we would like to do, things with Parks and Rec and all that. We have to come up with a package that's feasible, and so we can actually get some things done. Somebody used the term pie in the sky. I kind of felt like pie in the sky might be, especially with the first one. The first one was that I would love to go to that library. I want to visit that library. I'm going to get back there. Frisco. So
Debbie, Joy, I have a question for you as far as capital capital campaign stuff, I know you've had some experience in Baltimore and that. I was just talking to Helene, is now is with being in the pandemic, is now the right climate to go after corporate capital finances? Maybe this is a question for Todd also, as far as if you want to engage a capital campaign. My church was getting ready to do one until COVID hit, and then we tabled it. So trying to get a handle on the temperature of the corporate climate, and they're willing to release monies from their pocketbook.
Yeah, Tim. So I'll tell you, there's a lot of money out there to be had at this point. There's a lot of money on the sideline looking for, I wouldn't say safe places to park, but places that have good credit ratings. I mean, there's a lot of P3 providers, finance groups that we work with who are more than eager to look at projects like this to see if financially they can make it. Interest rates, obviously at historic lows still. And, so there's a lot of interest in these types of projects, and so I have some partners that we're talking to about other projects that we're working on right now. But I'd be happy to bring in, and they'll tell you what they see and what they think, and if there's something they can do for you.
I think as we go forward on our financial strategic planning, I think we want to look at all angles and all areas, and that sounds interesting. I think I would like to explore that just as an option. So
yeah, you ought to look at everything, see if it works for you.
Bill, I'll try to get some recaps, notes, and thoughts, and this will be available for review. We'll edit it up, and it'll be available to the public. So
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
we don't
Tim,
have
if I could,
if anybody, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to caution everyone, on the two concepts you looked at today. I want to thank the architects, and Debbie, thank you for working with them on this. But again, it's just concepts. They both stated that, the most important element of the concept was the township's input. So this is just their thought process, a starting point for them. So I wouldn't get too hung up on what they did, the amount of glass, 2-story, 1-story buildings, placement on the site at this time. It's just a starting point, as is, the budget. We developed a program based on combining the two concepts together, where it's more of just a spreadsheet. These are the spaces that are identified. These are the square footage for those spaces. And this is the square foot cost for something of that size. Certainly, if you decide to go out for an RFP, I would recommend both these architects be listed in that RFP, as well as a few others. And then, take it from there. And that's where you really start diving into, what's this building going to look like? How is it going to serve our community? And those types of things. So I wouldn't get too hung up on what you're looking at today. Again, it's from the 1,000-foot level, and it had absolutely no input from the most important person, which is you.
I have a quick question to both Chris and Debbie. I think the thing that really kind of, in my mind, I need a little bit of help with is, at what point do you get together a team or pay a professional marketing team to help you go around to the very many professional establishments we have in our township to see if we can start a capital campaign? Where does that fit in the timeline? Do they need a 2-year thing? I'm sure they fundraise throughout the whole thing, but in your experience, how long does it take? When does it generally get started?
Thanks, Celine. It can vary. And often what ends up happening is it fits into the time that's available. So for a capital campaign, think probably a year. You don't want to stretch it out too long because people lose interest. I wanted to amplify Todd's point. I am hearing directly here in Baltimore that companies don't have a place to donate their money. There's always a place to donate money, but they are looking for things to get involved with. So I have a friend who runs a nonprofit, and they're actually doing better right now than they did before the pandemic. So that's just one piece of information. But Helene, to your question about timeframes for a capital campaign, you'd want to run it, I think, for about a year. Before it's even announced, a A committee of people who are really well connected in the community has been started. There's a couple of people leading it who are really committed, and those people have been identified. And typically some major gifts have already been, there's commitments for a couple major gifts before the campaign is even announced.
So that you can point
Tim,
to-
I think I sent you before the holidays an email with some potential
You
consultants.
did,
Can you
and
send
that's still in my email. I've made a couple of inquiries, but I just haven't had a chance to really get into the weeds on that because I wanted to see, like Helene said, at what point do we start getting into that? And that leads me to another question: is if you do a capital campaign, you want your footprint at least somewhat tangible so that you know what people are donating, right? So
Correct.
Chris,
Yeah,
Chris
so
and Chris and I had a discussion about, you take an RFP to a certain level, so you know if you want Pfizer to donate so much money to a Pfizer room, or to do naming rights of certain, at what level of detail do you take that? That's another question I have. So,
Yeah,
what-
and I think Chris was right on. I mean, at some point, you just need to put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to build this building. It's 25,000 square feet. It's going to look like this. It's going to cost us $10, $12 million, whatever it's going to be. We're not going to start construction until we get this far along in the process as far as committed financing. But until we get the designs and we get the pictures and the concepts, it's really hard to get people to sign up for anything if they can't see tangibly what they're signing up for.
I know.
Right. And I think that point is, if that you want to go for the capital campaigning, you need, excuse me, you need an architect on board, the architect that's going to carry you through to the end of the project. That doesn't mean you sign a contract with them to the end. You can phase your contracts just like we did for the firehouse. You get an architect on board and get through the schematic design where they've done renderings for you like you've looked at today, of the exterior of the building, of the interior of the building, and take it to a point where you can go out and sell it. And you're selling exactly what's going to be built. Taking the renderings you looked at today, I don't think is a good idea, because what your end product may look absolutely nothing like what you looked at today. If you decide to go with one of these architects, well, then maybe it will. But even if you go with one of these architects, based on some of the discussions we've had here, I think it's going to be a completely different look. So you want that architect on board, and they can help you with the renderings and everything to go out and do that capital fundraising. And it may be you get to a point, if it takes a year to do that, 6 months into that, you may have a comfort level where we can have the architect continue on with the design for bid documents.
yeah, and I think one of the concerns is that you don't know how deep those corporate coffers are. I mean, I don't want to restrict the size of the building. If indeed we could get $10 million from the corporate community, then I don't want to shortchange ourselves. That's kind of that's.
Yeah, I think the township would need to make a commitment to what the building is and what the budget is, and then try to campaign to get that budget covered.
Does it make sense to phase it as we figure it out? And okay, the first one seems pretty modular. You can add on to that long rectangle. I'm only making a suggestion because I'm agreeing with Tim. Like, we don't know how much we're going to raise from these businesses, and just to make an assumption and say, okay, we're going to spend 25 million if we don't know we can raise 15 million.
And one of the things we're handicapped with the sorry, Sue, community center, I keep saying rec center, is that you want to make sure you build the footprint, and maybe you don't build all 25,000 square foot, but maybe can you start with a core, and then at least have a footprint where you can expand maybe in the next few years, have it a phased approach, because I think we're all getting overwhelmed by one big number, and I think we all kind of know what we would like at the rec center, but we also know it's prohibitively expensive to expand just a few thousand square feet. That's kind of my thinking on that.
It's certainly something that's feasible, but again, my recommendation is get an architect on board and get through that schematic phase, and see where that takes you.
If I can throw in a couple of wrenches, is one thought is to look at a different site, and that is where the parking lot is next to the admin building, in that is 1.5 acres of space, and there might be some other space, and maybe it would make more sense to share a parking lot like that at the admin center, which none of us has ever seen filled, with a library. And, you know, our meetings are now only once a month, and they're pretty much never filled. So, you know, maybe we could drop back and look at that particular site. And the other is, I would like to drill down deeply to really find out from the neighbors of Anderson Park whether or not they're really going to object to the library. Do they really think that's not recreation? If we take this money that we're thinking about spending and instead expand the rec center to benefit it as all, and build library components into it, because we've put this onus on the rec center that it has to make money, and yet it's a 3-legged dog, if not a 1-legged dog. And, you know, it's struggling. And I kind of think that we're pulling a rug out from under the rec center again. If there's no way that we can expand the rec center to its benefit and incorporate the library there, because that neighborhood is absolutely going to fly off the handle, fine, I understand it. But I'd really like to dig down into that, drill down into that, and find out really how much opposition is there for that site, because I see a great symbiotic relationship with the two. And I know we've talked about it before. I guess I really want to push the envelope on that particular topic.
I get what you're saying, Lauren. Before you make a big commitment, let's make sure that we haven't fully investigated
I mean, for the firehouse, there were several people who were, you know, hot about the firehouse, and I get it. And I just really wonder, are they really, I don't know, I would just really like to do a targeted survey of that neighborhood to find out if they're really going to object to expanding the rec center to include library components. If they're really going to object that much, that it's absolutely off the table. I just think that it's worth doing that due diligence, as that cliched phrase is, to make sure that we're absolutely not, you know, cutting ourselves off from a possibility.
Well, as you can hear, I think we're in a state of flux. That's why I think that we probably need to, the supervisors probably need to have an executive session on this. Do we have any more guidance that we need to give, Tim, to anyone? LSI, are they at the end of their deliverables?
LSS, I think, is getting near their end. This is kind of the end of your phase 2, right, Deb and Todd? Am I correct?
We are getting to the end of phase 2. Yes. I did want to mention, Helene and Tim, and to the whole board, if you decide you want to do a capital campaign, if you engage with fundraisers, they will do the research into the community and help identify what the capacity is for fundraising. So that's typically part of the service. But as Chris said, generally a donor is going to want to know what the project is. They're going to want to see some drawings, and they're going to want to know what the budget is. So really, instead of being chicken or egg, we really do need to put that stake in the ground. I was curious about Anderson Farm Park. Is it possible to use that space for a library or a learning center? I thought there were some deed restrictions, or am I misremembering?
Great question.
No, I think one reason, and that this is kind of somewhat, and I can circle back with Joe, but I think there was a question: does the expansion of the library function violate the deed restriction? And I think I guess it depend on if you view libraries as kind of a programmatic recreational function, you could probably make the argument that it falls within the deed restriction. But then if you interpret the deed restriction verbatim, the rec center shouldn't even be there in the first place. So, and I think a lot of it has to do with the temperature of the residents. So I tend to agree with Lori. I think there's a lot of conjecture on what we think the residents, sometimes the squeaky wheel, is the one that plays out a lot at the meeting. I don't know what the silent majority is in that community. Obviously, I think a library would be more palatable to some people than a firehouse, but that's just my personal opinion. I assume to do a random sampling or targeted survey isn't a huge effort, and
that might be one of the stakes that we need to put in the ground first is to figure out site. You know, where are we going to put it in? You know, obviously a lot of the architectural design will depend on that. So that would be part of a discussion, and yeah, that would be something we want to bring Joe Bresnan into that session to talk about that. And
hey, Chris, I have a question. Maybe Debbie, when you say you need to take this project and put a stake in the ground, when you say that stake, at what level of detail are you looking at as far as that? Are you looking at a partially designed building with dimensions and a cost? I'm just curious.
Well, I think if you want to go for fundraising, if you're going to go to corporations and ask them to give you money for a building, they're going to want to know what the building looks like. So I think to do that, you would need to have an architect under contract and take it through the schematic phase of the drawing. Get it to the point where it's what you want. It looks like what you want it to look like. But you don't go into the dimensioning and the detailing of the wall sections and everything else. Because at that point, if someone's willing to give you $10 million, but they say, I want it to look like this, you have the ability to do that. Get it to the point where you like it and you want it. And then you go out and say, here's what we're looking at building. Give us money.
yeah, I understand that. I think, yeah, we've got to have something to show, and we have to show a level of commitment that's like, yeah, this isn't just going to dry up, it's going to happen. And I think maybe that's where we're at. We're at the point where we have to decide, are we going to commit to this? Where do we want to put it? And, and what size do we want for our community? And like I said, I would love for more people to visit the Lower Providence Library. I think it's a good example because it's a community the same size and structure that we are. And I think it's a reasonable model. I'm not saying we have to do exactly what they've done, but size-wise, I think it's in the realm of what's possible and what's for our township.
I think that's a good idea. I would also love to hear from the Lower Province and maybe some of the other library. What would they have done differently? Would they have made it smaller? Would they have made it bigger? Some of the concepts that we've talked about with COVID coming into play now, having a space that you can rent out to small businesses for meeting spaces and things like that. I think since this time last year, concepts for not just libraries, for office buildings, for schools and everything else, it's completely out of the box now. It's a whole new world.
I might jump in and to support what Chris is saying. It is a whole new world. And fortunately, we do have our other libraries in other communities where we're actually on the ground doing the work. So kind of in real time, we can bring some of that information to the table.
And one thing I should add, one thing PFM will look at is they're going to look at more than just the cost. They will look at models of operating costs. This is going to be an operations study of not just our existing departments, but what are the most lean ways and efficient ways of running and operating a library. So I think we'll be looking at some of those costs as well, Mr. Chairman. So.
Yep. If anybody doesn't, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll adjourn this.
I'll try to come down at Bill with maybe put some ideas for next steps as far as the order of fundraising and we can chew that around at another workshop. So,
Yeah, and another thing, I think it's a great suggestion Chris made is to maybe have a call with the Lower Providence supervisors. It's Kara, maybe Gary. Just say, we're whomever, maybe the committee that runs the library, and say, what would you do differently now? I mean, I think it's,
don't build.
yeah,
That might be one.
you don't doing a 360.
All right.
Okay. Very good.
Anything else?
I think we've hit a natural pause. So.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Thank you, everybody that
you.
participated.
Thank you very much. 7:59.
Thanks.
Job. So,
Thank
Good
you.
information. Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Yeah.